My name's Cassidy Gary, and this project is about the key figures of the Underground Railroad, which was a network of secret routes and safe houses that led slaves to Canada for their freedom and liberty. Harriet Tubman was born in 1822 on a plantation in Maryland. She was born into slavery due to the fact that both her parents, Harriet and Ben Ross, were enslaved. Kate Larson states that Harriet's original name was Araminta, and she was sold to multiple different farmers who would whip her, causing her scars for the rest of her life. During Nat Turner's Rebellion, which was a rebellion of slaves that were located in Virginia, Harriet was struck on the head with an iron weight. This caused her to suffer from seizures for the rest of her life. After the incident, she was sold to John Stewart, who had her work as a dock worker, a field hand, and a lumberjack, which would later help her when working on the Underground Railroad, according to Larson. Harriet had tried to run away once in 1849. She got to Philadelphia, where she gained her freedom. She had multiple, what you would call rescue missions, between 1850 and 1854, which involved her helping her niece, three brothers, husband, and other slaves escape to Philadelphia. Because of these rescue missions, Thomas Garrett and William Still had asked her to become a conductor for the Underground Railroad, and she gained the name Moses because of her helping enslave people to freedom. From 1855 to 1860, she made multiple trips back to Maryland to try to rescue her family members, which ultimately failed, but she had brought back multiple others with her. If she could not bring slaves back due to the danger, she gave them instructions, which were either in a secret code language or spiritual songs, on how to use the Underground Railroad on their own. According to Cody Hefner, a specialist at the Underground Railroad Museum, in total, Harriet Tubman saved 300 slaves during her 19 trips. On this slide, you will see two different pictures. The picture on the left of the screen is the newspaper article that was put out for a cash reward for Harriet Tubman's return when she ran away at the age of 19. The picture on the right was posted all around the Confederate States because she was considered a huge threat to the slavery systems and also plantation owners. So, if anyone caught her, then they were given a $40,000 cash reward. Frederick Douglass was born in 1817 in Maryland. He was also born a slave and was very lucky that he was able to learn how to read and write at a very young age, which is very unheard of as a slave. His original name was Frederick Augustus, but when he had escaped, he had changed his last name to Douglass to avoid recapture. His escape was very unheard of and unusual because he escaped by train and boat from Baltimore to New York. After escaping, he gave lectures on behalf of the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society, LOC Gov explains. His role during the Underground Railroad was not as a conductor, but rather a publisher for the North Star, which was an abolitionist newspaper. As Martin Luther King Jr. was the advocate for African American rights in the 1900s, Frederick Douglass became the advocate for the slaves' rights. The one thing you do not know about him was that he actually opposed of the Underground Railroad because he thought that too many slave hunters and slave owners knew about it, and because of the fact that it was extremely, extremely dangerous. Isaac Hopper grew up in a Quaker family these are people who believe that everyone is special in their own way and that people are equal. His family grew up in Philadelphia, which at the time was a free state. He was one of many people that were abolitionists. These are people who want to abolish the practice of slavery. Isaac Hopper helped contribute to the Underground Railroad by hiding runaway slaves in his home. He was able to provide the slaves with food, shelter, and money to help them on their journey to freedom. If slaves were injured, he would help them the best he could so that they could continue on their journey. The runaway slaves that he was helping would hide during the day and would travel at night. According to Jesse Greenspan, Isaac Hopper organized a network of safe havens and cultivated a group of informants to help him learn the plans of the fugitive slave hunters. When runaway slaves were caught and brought to court, he was able to find loopholes in the legal system to help the captured slaves gain their freedom and not be returned back to the plantation that they were found at. William Still was born in 1821 in New Jersey. Both of his parents were enslaved at his birth, but his father ended up buying his freedom, and his mother tried to run away once, but failed, but then was successfully able to escape along with her children the second time around. At the age of 20, William Still moved to Philadelphia and ended up joining the Abolition of Slavery Society. This was a society that was organized to help end the practice of slavery. He was interested in the society's efforts to assist slaves who had run away from the South, according to Larry Garra. When slaves were coming into his Philadelphia station from Harriet Tubman, he would keep record of their names, who their slave owner was, where they came from, how they escaped, etc. So, if families were separated, he could possibly reunite them by going through his records and connecting them to one another. And if their story did not sound believable enough, they did not want to take the risk on housing them. William Still was most known for being the only black person to write and publish a book called The Underground Railroad, which was about the activities of the Underground Railroad and helped tell the stories of the freed slaves from escaping enslavement to gaining freedom. According to Cody Hefner, once again a specialist at the Underground National Railroad Center, William Still helped 800 slaves escape for freedom. John Brown was born in 1800 in Connecticut, but later his family moved them to Ohio. Their house in Ohio ultimately became one of the key stops for the Underground Railroad by becoming a safe house for the slaves on their way to Canada. John helped the Underground Railroad by taking after his dad, who harbored the runaway slaves at his home and also at his warehouse. According to History.com, he was considered a leading figure in the abolitionist movement. Most of the other abolitionists wanted no violence against the slaveholders, whereas John wanted to make sure that the slaveholders and those government officials who were for slavery were punished for what they did to the African Americans. In 1859, John led an attack on a town called Harper's Ferry in Virginia. His idea was to free the slaves within the town and possibly the other surrounding towns, but because there was not a so-called plan in place to help liberate these slaves, the raid ultimately failed and left Brown and his men surrounded. Brown and his men suffered a trial which led to their hangings for this attempted raid. According to Rayburn Moore, because of the raid and the trial and the execution of John Brown, it attracted national attention, and the event became a symbol to both sides in the Civil War. Thomas Garrett was born in 1789 in Delaware. His family helped hide runaway slaves and helped them escape towards Canada. Thomas knew Harriet Tubman because she passed through his station many times. When she would return from her missions exhausted and tired, he helped provide her with money, food, shelter, and new shoes to help her continue on her missions to help free more Southern slaves. He made sure that every single one of Harriet's missions were documented too. He is recognized for his courage and bravery because after he was caught violating the Fugitive Slave Act for rescuing 4 adult slaves, he endured a lawsuit. According to MSA, after being fined $5,400, he stood up and gave an hour-long speech during which he professed that he would continue his efforts to help fugitive slaves gain liberty, even more so from that point forward. After the lawsuit was over, he had still remained active with smuggling slaves into Delaware from Maryland. In total, Garrett helped more than 2,750 fugitive slaves by providing the slaves with money, clothing, food, shelter, and sometimes, if too dangerous, he would personally escort them to a safer location. Because of all the lives that he saved, his funeral was actually interracial. There were lines of both white and black people who were there to show him love. The biggest event that happened at the funeral was that 6 black men were the ones to carry his casket to his burial site. And last but not least, there's Levi Coffin, also known as the president of the Underground Railroad. He was born in 1798 in North Carolina. At an extremely young age, Coffin became an abolitionist because at the age of 7, he witnessed a column of chained enslaved people being driven to the auction, Greenspan states. At the age of 15, he was helping harbor runaway slaves on his family's farm and brought them food so they could be strong enough to finish their journey north. Once he was older, Coffin and his wife would continue to help runaway slaves by having their house considered a safe house. In the darkness of night, he would lead the group of slaves along the secret and dangerous path, University of Richmond states. Over the 20 years that he was a part of the Underground Railroad, he saved more than 3,000 slaves. Although he was arrested once for housing slaves, that did not stop him from helping the African American slaves. During the time of the Underground Railroad, about 100,000 slaves were able to escape for freedom, with these people's help along the way. Though these people were just the biggest parts of the Underground Railroad, there were many more that helped and had gotten no recognition for their hard work, bravery, and courage. These people risked their lives and their families' lives to help African Americans to freedom. They did have a choice to help or not, but instead of just sitting by and watching slavery happen, they took action and were ultimately saving hundreds of thousands of lives. This slide is presenting the sources that were used to help bring this project together, and the information that was used was cited in the presentation and mentioning the author. And Cody Hefner was my interview from the National Underground Railroad Center. This slide is presenting the sources that were used to bring this project together by using the pictures and news articles from various sources.